Hello and welcome back to another update video of the V2 conversion for Vox Mundi. I've been doing a lot of background work here. If you think the map looks similar, it's because it looks similar. I have modified quite a few things though. I've moved around cores and moved around populations and stuff. And the main objective of this video is to show you where the power lies. I will also show you the result of one of my test games that I ran to the very end and tell you some about it, so you can modify your opinions if you left some in the earlier video. So first off, I just want to give you a rundown of the most powerful nations in the world. We have Great Moravia here, of course. It is the most powerful nation in the world, and I have been working hard on balancing its event. What I've figured works best, I'm going to show you later on so you can comment on it. But in any case, I want to show you especially the population here, because the population kind of decides if the nation has a great power possibility or not. So, in EU4, you know it's all about how big you are on the map. In Victoria 2, it's all about your industrial capacity. In other words, how many workers you have in your territory. So, Great Moravia has 18 million people. Lithuania here has 2.5, so they are incredibly small. Jämtland is barely even on the map with their, 0.5 million, kind of. These nations are incredibly small, except for Skåne, that actually has almost this, they have more population than Jämtland. Valois here has an impressive 11.12 million base people. The Latin Commonwealth has 6 million, which is way less, but the Latin Commonwealth is actually still one of the greater powers, because they acquire people by annexing Pisa and taking back their cores and annexing Sicily. So they usually catch up, even though they have an inferior amount of people. They have a much greater industrial base. I will get back to that later on. So, Pisa here usually gets annexed by the Latin Commonwealth for one reason and one reason only. I made the Latin Commonwealth the... what do you say? Yeah, the cultural union of all Latin cultures. So, that means that if they sphere Pisa, they can annex Pisa. Or Pisa will propose annexation, rather. Castile. Castile is everyone's favorite nation. They only have 4.15 million people. But that doesn't stop them, because they will reconquer some land from Seville, which still doesn't put them way above 5 million. But they do have their colonial possessions here that keeps funneling in important resources into their economy. And in my test games, Castile has always done very well, not too well, as they have done in Crusader Kings 2 and EU4, as you may know. But instead, they did just really well, until they lost a war and was forced to release their puppets. Then things really swung the other way for them. So I am hesitant when it comes to releasing these two puppets they have, because this secures them a spot in the Great Power list, where they honestly belong. Another nation that may surprise people as being a bit weak is Great Baghdad. They only have 8.5 million people living there, even though they're like the biggest nation on the map. They do reach great power status, they do, but they don't like invade Europe and take everything over. They are actually quite conservative and usually get pressured in crises to give up a lot of land. They are a very interesting nation, because when they industrialize, they do industrialize quite hard. And Great Baghdad also has the opportunity to expand into this area of the map, because these are all uncivilized nations. Hamadan, Sistan, the Mamluks, Chagatai, Sheng, etc. Everything here is uncivilized. And the AI, well, it's random which AI goes where, as I've seen in my test games. But the one that conquers the most of Sistan, that has 18 million people, usually gets out on top. Look at this. Hamadan has 3 million, Sistan has 18. The Mamluks have 19 as well, so whichever nation conquers stuff here usually gets enough men to fuel their factories for several years to come. Sicily here has not even a million. Turov has 4 million, and they usually survive. they do very well in the test games and build up a little industrial base. I've even seen them become a great power. That has happened. Ossetia is an uncivilized nation that gets eaten immediately, but is also a hotbed for crises because this area has seen at least 5 crises in my test games, all resulting in Ossetia being put back on the map as a civilized nation. Another surprising contender for the Great Power Throne is Antalam Faith. They are pretty much the Netherlands of this universe. They don't have much population, but they have a massive sphere of influence. They usually sphere a lot of things and become a great power by simply just outcompeting their competitors in diplomacy. I don't really need to mention Scotland and Anglia. Scotland is a non-factor in most games, and Anglia, which many people have asked me to add in events to make Anglia appear back from Valois here, which I am probably going to do, to be honest, but I'm holding off for the moment to see if the balance will be thrown off by me doing so. The main reason, is because of all the crises that appear here. Anglia has been back on the map entirely once. There were 4 crises in a row here after Valois lost a great war. And it was awesome because Valois became fascist and had depleted their manpower, was forced to release Anglia pretty much entirely, and then they built up their fascist armies and took it all back. It was actually quite epic. In any case, the biggest issue I have with all of these populations here are the fact that our fan favorite here, as I call them right now, they have gone through several name changes. They are currently called CLN because it's Creoch Lochlan Noa, which means New Scandinavia in Irish. The other shorthands looked absolutely appalling. I don't remember them because they were that bad, so I decided upon CLN for now. Anyway, they only have 2.16 million people. I have currently set it so that the CLN gets a massive immigration bonus, just because they are the CLN. I am not pleased with that solution, because it's just because they are the CLN. The problem they have here is the fact that they are a reactionary HMS government, which doesn't exactly attract any more immigrants than a democracy or something. There are a few democracies here that get all of the immigrants. And then we have Vinland here, with their 1.3 million. These two are very evenly matched, but Vinland is almost always the one that gets to great power status. And I don't know why, because the CLN actually starts out with some of the world's only factories. And the converter, interestingly enough, put those factories in Atlanta, which is fine and fun. But I thought they would do better than they did, but I've never seen them in great power status, except for in the game where I boosted their immigration by a multiplier of 4, I think. So I really need suggestions on how to proceed with the CLN. Should they be a secondary power for all the game? Should they, because people have been asking for revolutions and stuff, and it doesn't make sense to have revolutions in a secondary power that doesn't really hold any influence, especially if they only have 2.16 million people. I mean, after 50 years, they will probably have like 4 million people, maybe 3 million people. I may be overestimating the immigration here, depending on how many wars there are over in Europe. So I'd like some suggestions on how to proceed from here. Vinland, they have lots of slaves, they usually abolish slavery. In any case, they and the CLN usually fight over these nations, the Iroquois and the Blackfoot, and Vinland actually usually teams up with the Iroquois, because they start out allied, and beat down upon the CLN. At least the CLN has never ever lost all their territory to someone. They have been severely reduced in a few games, but they have never been wiped off the map. In any case, I did split off Florida into its own little nation here. It's called Talam Grain, or the Land of Sun in Irish. It's a mix of Sunni and Karaite, Ladinos and Irishmen. It's a melting pot of all manner of cultures. They have a new culture, by the way, that I call... what did I call them? I don't remember, but I can show you later on. I've decided upon a few names here for these nations. This is Tejas. We have New Granada. We have Rio Grande here. They were named Grand River, but I just translated it to Spanish. Cajamarca, which is the most powerful South American nation if immigration is not artificially rerouted to the CLN. I don't know why, but they just are. Even though they start out with a pitiful manpower pool, it rises quickly. None of these have an especially large amount of people, except for Brazil here, with their 1.6 million. Well, not Brazil, but Rio Grande. They are still based upon Brazil, Peru, Argentina, and Colombia, though. And of course we have Anglia-Andbergia here in the center of South America. They also receive quite a bit of immigration. In any case, let's take a look at Asia here. Sibir is a powerful nation, but they never really go out. Well, they do actually. In some games they have expanded too much. But in any case, I'll show you that game later on. They have 8.72 million people, and these nations here, like Sheng has 100 million people, but they haven't actually. This was the thing that surprised me the most. When Sheng westernizes, which is very late in the game, they do not skyrocket up to a great power position. I do not know why that is, but I think it may be because they are heavily onset by wars throughout the entire game. They win wars and they lose wars constantly, which probably means that their people are in disarray most of the game. Takahashi has never done anything at all. They have 7 million people. They just sit here. They don't do anything. Korea has 13 million people. Most of that goes back to Sibir when Sibir reclaims its cores. Here in this area we have actually a very limited set of movement. We do have some populous nations, like Aceh. And then we have Sheng Sultan's land, which only has 100,000 people. But they are very thinly spread out over all of Australia. In any case, I want to load in... Oh, right, I forgot Dacia. How could I? They have, well, 3.5 million people. And they have gotten great power status once in my test games. And they got it by beating down upon Great Moravia when Great Moravia lost a great war. Yes, you heard it here first. Great Moravia actually lost in one of my test games. Anyway, let me show you this finished game. Let's see, is this the finished game? No, this is the one. Of course, it's 1934. Actually, it's this one even. Final.1. I named it so I would remember. Right. This is the result of one of the games. Let me load in as why not Moravia? And I'll show you the great power list and tell you some of what happened in the game. This is how Europe looks at the end here. This is played without the CLN modifier to immigration. That's something I added after this game. As you can see here, Valois has lost a lot of territory to the Latin Commonwealth. Surprising, huh? Because the Latin Commonwealth had half of its population. And it's lost almost all of its territory back to Anglia. Actually, every single Anglian core is now Anglian, as you can see, except for the ones not held by Valois. The Latin Commonwealth, let's see here, they have a population of almost 16 million people. That's significant. While Valois has 12.9. Something happened there, I'm not exactly sure what, but the Latin Commonwealth annexed their way to a greater future. And Castile has 37 million. I'll show you why, though. It's because of China they have this. In any case, let me show you the great power list, so you can make your own picture of this. Moravia is way too powerful for its size. It has an industrial base that is absolutely insane. Actually, it isn't that insane, but if you compare to the 4 last powers here, if you compare those 4 to the first 4, the disparity is incredibly obvious. I have since improved the splitting event for Moravia. I will show you that later. In any case, as you can see, Moravia still does not win every war they start. They lose frequently, so I guess that works as intended. In any case, we have Moravia, Castile, Latin Commonwealth, Great Baghdad, and Sibir. The first 5 have been on the list quite constantly. Actually, when I think about it, Sibir has not. Sibir did climb their way back up the list. But the 4 later great powers here are very, very dependent on how it goes for them. As you can see here, the ones after 8 are Lithuania, we have Anglia, Valois, Dacia, Teas, Pampas, Antalamfey, the Mamluks, and unfortunately we have the CLN way down here at place 24 for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. But, oh, I just want to tell you something so you don't get too confused. I did change the start date for fascists to the same date as communists, because I didn't want it to be artificially limited to the 1900s, because this world is filled with immense empires that have leanings towards something called, that could be akin to fascism already at the start of the game. So, in any case, Great Baghdad colonized most of Africa, and they do constantly do that. One of the nations that needs looking over is Fez. I'm not sure what to do with Fez, because they are very static. They have attacked Kanem Bornu once. And I'm curious if you think that, like, should Great Baghdad be the cultural union here? Because if they are the union, they can annex Fez by sphering. And that might be preferable to some people, because then Great Baghdad is more of a power player. They still keep their spot here in the Great Power list, but they rarely expand anywhere. Of course, it might be horrible for us if we decide to play something like Dacia here, and the Great Baghdad is just insanely powerful. But they have lost several wars, so, you know, in Victoria 2 everything is possible. The rest of Africa is split between Castile and Anglia, funnily enough. Here you can see Sistan having been annexed completely by Great Baghdad. Hamadan survived though with their limited amount of people. It's grown to 3 million. The Mamluks were almost entirely eaten by Valois, but Valois gave it all back in crises and as war goals with liberation goals. Sheng has been decimated here. It's quite interesting to see, because they're still powerful. They have over 100 million people, but they have been hard at war with Great Baghdad. They have been at war with Castile and Sibir, along with some other ones, I think. In any case, this is an example of how one game can look. I haven't barely added any events at all, except for the Moravian splitting event, but I have modified a lot of stuff, like cores and also like preferences for migrations and things like that. Vinland, as you can see here, has grown to a quite impressive size, because they won every single crisis over colonization with the CLN, and they also liberated Alaska from them. As you can see here, the nationality has slowly became less and less Irish and more Vicapi Norse. It's really fun to see which parties have come in power here as well. I can show you on the ledger, just for fun. There are quite a few fascists. Oh man, and the reason for this is the fact that there has been so many wars and so many losers, and the losers have always switched to fascism. Anglia, Ossetia, Antalamfeid. I'll skip all the insignificant ones. Let's see here. Valois is the biggest one, and the Latin Commonwealth as well. Moravia is liberal. Actually, liberalism is the thing that triggers their split in my event currently. It is the one that triggers it. As I said, I have been rebalancing this split event, and this is not it. Instead, let me show you how the new split event looks. In the previous version that I showed, it split up into 3 nations and left the Germans and the Scandinavians free. This one is severely different. What this one does is it basically splits Great Moravia in 2. Let me trigger this. As you can see here, Great Moravia shatters, the feudal and imperialistic foundations, etc. Truly the fall of a giant. And this is what happens. As you can see here, our nation changes to Moravia, but we have a Pruthenia of our own size up here. So this effectively splits Great Moravia in 2. And this is actually balanced, because half a Great Moravia matches the Latin Commonwealth and or Valois and or Castile in power. Almost exactly, actually. I'm not sure if it does that here in the beginning, where it hasn't started yet properly, calculated the great powers and such. But I thought that instead of simply giving the German states independence, they would get all of the cores that they want. So, I mean, the cores for Thuringia is here, and Pruthenia has lots of stuff that Lithuania and Turov has cores on, so it might face some wars and become weaker anyway. But Moravia does not keep the cores on Pruthenia. Instead, this is kind of a peaceful split, so to say. But this opens up for other nations to capitalize on this. The Magyars, for example, gain all the Magyar lands back, and Dacia, having lost all of the Transylvanian lands to Great Moravia back in the day, gains cores on all Transylvanian land, as you can see here. So every land that has a minority of Transylvanian will become a core of Dacia. This leaves Moravia in a much more peculiar spot. Oh, and yes, also all Italian holdings or Latin holdings are split off into Ragusa. And Ragusa, in my idea, will be absorbed by the Latin Commonwealth. And the Latin Commonwealth will encompass most of southern France and Italy, and thus match Moravia in power. That's the idea in any case. The Latin Commonwealth actually starts out with quite a few cores on Ragusa. As you can see here, there's clearly a few cores ready to be reconquered immediately. And when these nations split off, I actually didn't know much about Victoria too, but it seems like when they split off and Great Moravia had built units in, for example, this area here, let's see, Brandenburg, for example, all the Brandenburg troops will go to Pruthenia, which is a very fair way of doing it. As you can see, we still have quite a few troops here, but some of them are Ragusas, because they're placed oddly. But this event will not trigger at game start, usually, so they will be pretty evenly spaced out. So it all works, to be honest, and all of these German nations have had a chance to, or will have a chance to, gain independence from Pruthenia, and Moravia loses most of its conquests when it splits. So for now, this is what I'm going with. Though I could add an additional layer to it if you viewers would like that, like the fall of Pruthenia, just splitting off Jylland and all the German states and seceding lands to Lithuania and Turov, or like an additional fall for Moravia. But the thing is that right now, as it looks, Europe is practically split between Valois, Pruthenia, Moravia and the Latin Commonwealth. That is also why I am quite hesitant on simply breaking off Anglia without any reason. So I would like to ask for triggers for this. Like, what would give Anglia independence? I don't randomly want to give them all of their territory back, because this is practically what makes Valois so strong. Oh, and something I did not go in on earlier is who starts with factories. I did get one suggestion to add a machine parts factory to Turov, but I'm not sure if I want to do that, because I looked through the history files and found that there were no machine parts factories in the start of the game. So that might kickstart the economy a bit too much. I'm not sure. The thing is, in any case, Turov usually becomes a very tall nation. They have a lot of investment in it and usually builds a load of factories. In any case, the ones that start with factories are, in particular, Castile. Castile starts with a few factories. Valois and the Latin Commonwealth start with a few factories each. I do believe that... oh yes, CLN starts with a factory. They are the only American nation with a factory, by the way. And I think there were a few more factories. I'm not sure if there's a way to actually see that in-game, but I think there's no factories over here in the uncivilized lands, and I do not believe Sibir got any factories. I'm actually going to go into the game and see in the ledger if there is a way to see where the factories are, because I looked it up 3 days ago, so I don't remember it in my head exactly. I actually think that Moravia might not have any factories, when I think about it. No, they don't. So that's actually a balancing factor for Great Moravia. They do not have any factories, but I know for a fact that both the Latin Commonwealth and Valois start with factories. This makes them get on even ground with Great Moravia. And I think the nation with the most factories in the world is Castile, at the game start. They, yeah, here they have some canned food factories, wineries, and luxury clothes factories. And they have some in Granada as well. Oh, here you can see they have the steel, cement, explosives, small arms, glass, artillery, and clippers. But that actually works very well for them. They don't expand into Europe anything, but they do funnel industrial progress towards it, which I like. In any case, I will continue working on this and run a few more test games before I do any more changes or add any more events. I will keep on tweaking this event in particular, but as you saw, Great Baghdad may or may not need a splitting event, because I remember people talking about a splitting event for Great Baghdad. Instead, I would propose either to make it stronger or simply split all of the African holdings after a certain date, perhaps sometime after it has colonized all of Africa. It may split off into Fez or something. I don't know, to be honest. They aren't that powerful, but they are a huge factor when it comes to great wars. In every single game so far, they have lost territory to Damot through crises. Every single time. Every single time they have lost land. This is the nation I use for spectating, by the way. Funj, because it never gets attacked for some reason. I do not know why. The Victoria 2 AI is weird. In any case, let me take a look here so I don't forget anything. Oh yeah, the same with Cheng. Cheng does not really need an event to split it up, because the AI doesn't westernize that quickly. As you can see, they're only at 35 at game start. Everyone is, almost. I think there's someone who is less, I'm not sure. Actually, it seems like all of them are at 35%. Maybe we have some Africans here. Yeah, 15%. So, they usually don't reach great power status anyway. And it might be interesting to have it as a potential player slot for me. Was there anyone else that got rebellion suggested for it? I think Vinland. The problem I have with Vinland here is that all the suggestions have been about slavery. And I do not know how to prevent Vinland from abolishing slavery. They usually abolish slavery in the first 50 years or something. And if I could, I would stop them. As in, through event code. But the only way I can think of doing it would be to immediately give them slavery allowed when they disallow slavery. But that is a way to heavy-handed solution for me. And I really like the dynamics that appear in these games. So, the major issue, to recap, is the fact that the CLN is not powerful enough to justify a split or a revolt at all. It's not powerful enough. So, we need to either buff it, and if we need to either buff it or accept that it's a secondary power. And if we buff it, how should we? Should we have the heavy-handed immigration solution or not? Should we have something else? I'm open to suggestions. Great Moravia needs to have its split fixed and be split up into two nations, according to me, but you may think it needs even more splittage, and please say so if you do. Great Baghdad is not necessarily powerful enough to warrant a split. They are if they take over most of Sistan, but this is not necessarily Great Baghdad's to take. It may just as well be Great Moravia or someone else that takes Sistan. And Sheng is not powerful enough by far to justify a split. So, well, to recap, the great powers that are going to be in this game are Great Moravia / Moravia / Pruthenia, Valois, the Latin Commonwealth, Castile, Sibir, Great Baghdad. They are going to be great powers at one point or another. The potential great powers are definitely Dacia. They have become great power. We do have some of these have potential to become a great power if they westernize quickly, which they won't without help from, like, me. And Vinland, the CLN has a potential to become a great power if they get the right allies at the start. And Rio Grande, Cajamarca, they have potential to become great powers. Unfortunately, those who really liked Seville has, they are a great power at the game start, but they quickly get competed by their opponents. So in any case, please leave additional suggestions, and I will keep on working on this conversion, running simulations and adding events. And, well, at some time I will add the correct flag for all the nations and not just the Latin Commonwealth. Because no one has the correct flag right now. Like, Valois has the Chinese flag for some reason. It's all based on what the converter thought was appropriate, and apparently it is insane. So in any case, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.